Hey everyone, Matt here from Doctors Running, and today we're going to do a 100-mile review of the Puma Fast-R Nitro Elite. So this is Puma's longer distance marathon racing shoe featuring a carbon fiber plate and their super foam and EVA. We reviewed this some time ago. It has not had great availability, just became a little bit more available in Europe, and now it's going to be more available from what I understand in 2023. So if you're watching this in 2022, next year, if you're in 2023, this year, depends. I have gotten the chance to get 100 miles on this thing. I was really curious to see how it would do. It's a very unique shoe. Again, it's got a split midsole here with an EVA rear foot, and then their Nitro, a bio-based P-backs, nitrogen-infused P-backs in the forefoot, this is one of my favorite foams. Please, Puma, make a full-length version of this. It feels great. I already mentioned that. For those that are really interested in the full review, we've got a full-length written review that David and I did. We also have initial sub-2s on this shoe and a couple other comparisons. But what I want to dive into is how this shoe has changed over 100 miles and if my opinion of it has changed. And the answer to the first one is really it's actually maintained itself pretty well. Those who know me know that I grind the heck out of the posterior lateral heel, and I have created my own posterior lateral heel bevel right here. So this actually, the remainder of it's not too bad. It hasn't changed the ride that much just because I chewed this portion out, and I think it's so well beveled, I just mostly took off the lateral portion. So can I still run in the shoe? Yeah, it actually doesn't bother me. For longer efforts now, I do notice I get pitched out a little bit more than I would like, so my peroneal muscles, or fibular muscles, the muscles on the outside of my leg can get a little annoyed. But outside of that, it's pretty good. The forefoot outsole has been incredibly durable. It still grips really well. Just be forewarned, from what I understand, this outsole will be a little bit different from the one that's going to be available. But grip has been great. Grip has maintained over this time. And it's still, my opinions on this shoe are remaining the same. The EVA is still pretty firm. It pistons you forward. And as I talked about previously, I think those that have really strong quads and good knee control, this is a shoe that's going to work well. If it's a shoe that you want pitched forward, you want a firmer heel and a softer bouncier forefoot, this is going to work really, really well for you. If you're someone who lands farther forward and you want a ton of cushioning just in the forefoot and you're going to be up on your toes or what have you for longer distances, it's going to be a great shoe. For those of us that are not, I think this is going to work better for shorter intervals and faster tempos where you're just up a little bit higher. That's where it kind of sits for me. I'm, as you can see, a pretty heavy heel striker. And I think, and for kind of moderate efforts, I think this feels fine. But when I'm really starting to get down to it, I like a little bit more cushioning in the heel. When it comes to faster stuff, when I'm up on my toes, this feels awesome. I really love how this feels. I love, even if I start to kind of go back here, it still pitches me forwards. That said, if you have some knee sensitivity, so the patellar tendon and patellar ligament, so the tendon above and the ligament below, some people call the patellar tendon below, but we're not going to get into that. If you have some sensitivities there, this might be a shoe you need to be cautious with. And why is that? It's because when you land, it's going to pitch you forward. Your tibia is going to get propelled or like pushed forward very quickly, which means your knee is going to drive forward very quickly. Now, I'm sure you've heard of knees forward to toes and that kind of stuff, whether it's good or not. If you have adequate strength and movement control, that's probably going to be fine. But if you have some sensitivities to stresses there, like your knee going too far forward during your running gait, squatting, that kind of stuff, this may not be the best option for you if you are someone who's a rear foot striker and lands and has to transition like that up on your forefoot. You'll probably be fine. Outside of that, again, it's a super interesting ride. I'll do a comparison review with the Deviate Elite in just a little bit, but I have enjoyed it for faster efforts at shorter speeds and things like that. I would love to see what this would feel like with full length. When I have been wearing this for a while, so I've done some longer tempos efforts in this stuff, I do start to notice this gap, and I think that's probably my mechanics starting to break down. There is mild guidance to it just because it pivots you forward so much, and I do notice this piece which kind of pushes up into me, not in a bad way, but it kind of keeps you rolling forward. But when things start to fall apart, I really do notice this gap, and some people, that might not bother them. For me, it's something I've kind of harped on making a full ground contact outsole, midsole. So one of my comments is, I think Puma, if you can still keep weight down, because this thing comes at 7.5 ounces, which is pretty solid for women, for a men's size 9. I think women's size 8 is 6.1 ounces. I can't remember. 8mm drop, by the way, 35 in the heel. Yeah, no, 35 in the heel, 27 in the forefoot, I believe. So 8mm drop. I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, the suggestion that I had is see if you can take some of this Puma foam and extend it back and just have a small connection here to get a little bit of full ground contact. Because I'm impressed, and I totally support doing alterations geometry. I think it's a great way to save weight. I think there's some interesting things that can be done with this just to add a little bit more ground contact to the midfoot. Because continuous ground contact, the more surface area you have, the more grip you have, and just the better inherent stability that you have in a shoe. This, yes, there is some torsion and rigidity still just because the plate is so stiff in this shoe. It's not the stiffest, but it does a good job of holding these pieces together. This concept isn't really new. Other companies have used torsion systems somewhat similar to this before, not with that full gap because they haven't been able to do this. But I do think this will work well for people, but those a little bit that tend to land a little bit farther forward. Upper, I got to talk about. It's solid. I've really enjoyed this upper. Yes, in the summer months, it was a little bit warm. It tends to kind of keep heat in there, but if it's fairly normal temperatures, it's totally fine. This upper is far more secure than I initially thought it was going to be. It locks the foot down. It's kind of got this booty construction here. Sock-like is probably a better term I would use. More room than you would expect. You do have to be a little careful with the laces, and you have to trust this thing. So initially I was like, I gotta lock these laces down. This feels too flexible. My foot's gonna fall off the platform. And it didn't. So once I loosened it up and let this thing hug my foot, totally fine, let go. So this tongue is really, really thin. The laces are thin. They will kind of cut in your foot if you tie it too deep, but don't worry because this locks your foot in really, really well. The heel spoiler, I should say, I really have enjoyed. It is a little bit flexible. Initially, it was putting pressure on my Achilles insertion, but long term, it's been totally fine. I think it gives a nice little bit of structure here, and probably serves as a warning to people coming out. You can like kick them. I'm just kidding. But it provides enough structure here while letting the rest of this be flexible that it didn't really bother my heel, which has been really, really nice. So, would I recommend this shoe to everyone? Like every super shoe, the answer is no. I think it's going to work for a very specific population. I think it's going to work for people that really want a lot of forefoot cushioning, people that tend to land a little bit farther forward, want a highly cushioned ride where the majority of things are kind of placed in the forefoot. It's going to work for some people for shorter distances, people that land farther forward. You're going to be able to take it for longer distances. People that want an efficient shoe that kind of mechanically rocks you forward, that's probably the other group that's going to do really, really well with the shoe. It does a great job of keeping things rolling. It's a little bit jarring at first, but once you get used to it, it's fine. It's got a pretty solid heel bevel, and if you want to create that posterolateral bevel, just keep, grinding it like I do. Nice transition off the forefoot. Again, this forefoot is really, really awesome. And I gotta say, Puma, I do appreciate what you're doing with this shoe. I'm super excited to see what version 2 brings, although most people are just gonna get used to version 1 as it finally comes out in 2023. But I am impressed, and I'm impressed to see what companies are doing with geometry. And the next thing we've got to see is, again, who's this going to work well for in terms of mechanics of the ankle and mechanics of the knee. There was some interesting early evidence from Puma, so maybe a little bias there, that this was helping rock people forward, which is using some of those concepts of guidance that we've talked about. Overall, it's a solid, interesting shoe. If you get the chance, I would try it on just because it's so interesting. And Puma, good job. You're still putting out good product, and I'm very excited to see what comes next from them.